Building the dam that would harness the mighty Colorado River would take more than 4 years and cost 96 lives. Work began in 1931 in Colorado's Black Canyon. Men called high scalers blasted loose any weak rock that might later fall on the work below. 4 tunnels, each 56 feet in diameter, were drilled through the canyon walls. The men worked from the platforms of a drilling jumbo so that up to 30 of them could drill at once. Next, a temporary earthen dam was built across the canyon and the river was diverted through the tunnels. The site was then dug down to bare rock. Cement was poured into forms to create giant interlocking cubes. The completed structure contains over 3.25 million cubic yards of concrete. Finally, the diversion tunnels were plugged and the water began to build up, forming Lake Mead, 10 miles wide and 115 miles long. The completed dam, dedicated by President Roosevelt on September 30th, 1935, provides flood control and generates over 6 billion kilowatt hours of electrical energy each year.
Shall we play a game?
I just wanted to make a quick video because I feel this information is very important. I just wanted to get it out there. I am going to do a deeper, more extensive study and expose on it. There's a couple things I want to bring to light. Is something that my friend Timmy found, which I believe is very important. I believe he has found something that is fitting with the keystone. And if you're not familiar with what the keystone essentially is part of the doorway or the gateway that unlocks the gateway. You know, we see the archways that have been built and they're being put up all over the Temple of Baal. Timmy's doing a lot of research on that, and he's got a very excellent video coming out soon. I'll be posting a link to his channel in the description. But something that is just unbelievable that came to mind, and it popped in my mind after I watched the movie Pixels. In the movie, one of the characters just screams out, totally random, just like how they're hiding the secret of the pyramid under the Hoover Dam. And I just thought how so many of us, including myself, have been focusing so much on CERN. And what if CERN has just basically been gathering an energy source like dark matter or whatnot to open a Stargate? And what if that Stargate is actually the Hoover Dam? And once I started researching this, I found some interesting articles. There's not a heck of a lot of them, but these articles are all talking about how the Hoover Dam was built like a Stargate. And Jonathan Glack has made a lot of videos showing the Hoover Dam bursting something forth that's been found in the U.S. currency. So I believe that a lot of people's different research in that this is all connected and culminating together. And if we look at this article, and this article that I'm showing you right now, I will also post a link to that in the description below, so you can go read this yourself. I think this needs to be looked into on a much deeper scale, and I'm going to be doing it. Timmy's going to be doing it. I just think that there's something going on with the Hoover Dam, and what if what is going to be birthed forth is something that's actually going to come out of that area? What if this also is a large part of a smaller part? What if these archways to Baal they've been putting up, we don't know what's been constructed inside of them. I do have a video that I had seen where a person had mentioned that all the archways were built by robots. They were all built by machines. And who's to say, with the weird things that are going on this day and age of technology and what have you, what's to say that these archways aren't going to be dimensional portals put up all over the world for, you know, the armies of the underworld to come forth through, or fallen angels, the dark ones, whatever you want to call them. Whatever's coming through them isn't going to be good, but there's a lot of the stuff that's coming together, and I just believe that we need to be really, really paying attention very closely as to what is going on, and look into all aspects of all things in order to see what the enemy is up to.
This is how Palmyra looked as ISIL took control, the triumphal arch, before the group destroyed it. Today, the 2,000-year-old arch from the Temple of Bel looks like this. A group of Italian architects are reconstructing the arch using 3D robotic printers to bring the historic ruins back to life.
We sometimes think about if we were in the positions of the Syrian people, and we would like to have our monuments as Italians. Also, they're very important for us, this kind of monuments and the relation that we have with our place.
When the reconstruction is finished later this month, it'll go on display in London's Trafalgar Square and then New York's Times Square, before being taken to its final destination, the ancient city of Palmyra.
So the curious topic of the Hoover Dam is one that I've been wanting to come back and examine from a enclosed cosmological perspective for a while now. To me, it's just one more example of something that's been floating around out there in the conspiracy soup that, again, it seems to make a lot more sense if considered from a perspective where the stars aren't something that exists millions of light years away in outer space, but instead involve the spiritual realms, which somehow envelop the ceiling above our heads in this enclosed world. I'd actually never heard about any of the odd edifices and symbolism to be found at the Hoover Dam until I actually happened to visit there myself about 3 years ago. And as soon as I got out of the car and saw the two giant angel statues and the star map and zodiac made out of stonework on the ground, I instantly knew it was something I was going to have to go home and look into some more. And of course, when I did, there was a lot of others who had noticed these same out-of-place monuments and symbolism. And in the past few years since, a number of other people have made videos and written articles about the many strange aspects of Hoover Dam, such as the elements of Freemasonic symbolism, the idea of there being some sort of false flag attack planned, how the destruction of the dam appears to be portrayed on one of the U.S. bills, and things like the fact that the shape of the dam is almost identical to the throne that Madonna sat on in her infamous Illuminati Super Bowl performance, or the rather curious light show that was done on the front of the dam using a German soccer team logo, which, oddly enough, featured a goat and twin towers. And of course, another theme that has surrounded all the conspiratorial Hoover Dam speculation is the idea of it somehow being a stargate. And this, of course, ties heavily into the star map there, where it shows Alcyone of the constellation Pleiades. But it's the Stargate idea that has actually really intrigued me here, and the whole topic of Stargates in general is something that is honestly very intriguing to consider from the biblical flat earth cosmology perspective. Kip from the D13 Watchmen channel recently put out a video on the Hoover Dam Stargate topic, and there he mentions how in the movie Pixels, there's a somewhat random line from someone mentioning the, quote, pyramid hidden under the Hoover Dam, and then of course there's the movie Transformers showing the Allspark being hidden in a secret facility under the dam, and so we can see that allusions to something top secret going on there has even made it into the mainstream Hollywood zeitgeist at this point. But okay, here's my 2 cents on it for what it's worth. I certainly find all those avenues I just mentioned very interesting, and I'm not trying to discount anything at this point, since it's honestly all just conjecture anyhow. But for me, I honestly don't lean towards the idea that there might be some sort of massive device buried in the bowels of the superstructure, or some strange alien-like technology, embedded into the construction of the dam itself, or whatever. Could there be some sort of planned catastrophic destruction of the dam that would plunge the entire American Southwest into emergency mode? Well, that wouldn't shock me at all if it happened. When you even just look at the levels of Lake Mead, which is the water behind Hoover Dam, over the past few years, it's already somewhat catastrophic just in that capacity, but that's kind of a whole other topic. But okay, a Stargate. What does that even really mean? Especially if we're not talking about the sort of, ancient aliens type technological device from the Stargate movie and TV series, or any of the other countless sci-fi depictions of interdimensional portal machines. We're talking about Stargates here in the context of witchcraft and the occult. And honestly, it's kind of interesting to me that in none of the other videos or posts I've read on the occult New World Order connections to Hoover Dam, I've yet to see any of them that have explored the occult connections to the specific star featured on the Hoover Dam star map. First of all, it's interesting to note that there actually is an Alcyone Lodge somewhere in New York State, so there's clearly a Freemasonic connection to the star Alcyone. But even more interesting is the prominent place held in the history of theosophy by the name Alcyone. So, long before guys like Benjamin Creme were around, pronouncing the near arrival of the great Maitreya, or the coming one world leader, Antichrist, the Theosophical Society was fervently working to bring a Maitreya onto the world scene many decades before that. And two very prominent theosophists and occultists, the president of Theosophy at the time, Annie Besant, and this other guy, Ledbetter, were somehow led by their spirit guides to select this kid, basically, a 14-year-old Brahmin from India named Jiddu Krishnamurti, as the next Maitreya or Messiah of the New Age. And this guy, Krishnamurti, went by the name of, you guessed it, Alcyone. And he wrote a book called At the Feet of the Master, which he openly claimed were not his own words, but the words of the master who taught him. Any guesses as to who that master actually is? So this Krishnamurti fellow, he was able to channel demonic spirits, and bearing the name of the star Alcyone, he traveled around for many years, being heralded as basically the chosen one of Theosophy, speaking at various conventions and events around the world, until eventually he became disillusioned by all the politics and infighting within Theosophy and its many branches. And really, from what I can gather, ultimately came face to face with the reality that he was not the savior of the world. And in 1929, he publicly announced his official separation from the Theosophical Society, and began preaching a more generic New Age message that had no prophesied coming New Age messianic figures. And then yet, 2 years later, construction of the Hoover Dam begins in 1931, to be completed and opened by 1936, so it is rather curious timing. Now, when examining the monument erected to supposedly commemorate the men who died in the construction of Hoover Dam, many people have spent a lot of time trying to tease out esoteric meaning from the rather Egyptian-looking figure there, and what perhaps is being represented by the water and the sun and everything else. And it's real easy to get lost in the minutia of all that. But for me, one of the things that really strikes me is just the simple, rather hidden in plain sight type of message from the whole basic theme of sacrifice itself in the inscription. Now, I'm not saying that no one actually died in the construction of the dam. I mean, I would actually have a hard time being convinced by anyone that you could even build something the size of Hoover Dam in the 30s and not lose lives. But when you step back and just look at everything that was chosen to be incorporated into a memorial, supposedly for a bunch of construction workers, then it's really just bizarre. Now, if we go back and take some cues from the many other ancient examples of monolithic sites built by various pagan civilizations, whether it be the pyramids on the Yucatan Peninsula, or the Egyptian pyramids, or the mound builders of the Mississippi Valley culture, or Stonehenge, and so many other examples, we can start to realize that indeed the ritual of human sacrifice was more often than not a very integral component of how these structures were instilled with demonic spiritual energy in order to create a more intense connection between the human realm and the spirit realm. Now, at this point, I feel like I just need to stop and emphatically recommend all the material you can find on a man named Tim Bentz. I'll put links in the description below, but really this information comes through the vehicle of interviews that people have done with him. I first heard him in an interview done by Peter Goodgame, which was titled Canaanite Altars and the Federal Reserve, which just absolutely blew my mind. Rob Skiba has also interviewed Tim Bentz, and so yeah, if you haven't heard any of his material yet, then just wow, be prepared to be blown away. He talks about altars in the Middle East and elsewhere around the world, which are typically made of massive blocks of stone that have been used for ritualistic human sacrifice, and how this essentially creates a demonic stronghold in that region, sort of like a spiritual anchor point for the demonic realm that uses the monolith itself as kind of almost like a spiritual battery. And so Tim Bentz has traveled extensively, being led by God to find these altars and destroy them, and release these areas from demonic spiritual oppression. And yeah, he tells the most incredible story about being led by God to Jekyll Island, where the Federal Reserve was created in secret, and learning about the history of the island and how it essentially had a Nephilim tribe living there, which had a stone altar upon which humans were sacrificed. And this altar was, or is, underneath the very house where the Morgans and Rockefellers and the representatives thereof conspired to create the Federal Reserve. So definitely just go check that out, because it's probably one of the most intense interviews you'll ever listen to. But anyhow, this is the context and the concept through which I believe that the Hoover Dam and all the weird occult imagery and references to stars and angels and weird looking portal designs